Hi everyone. So today's video is on the quadratic formula, and this should be super short, although the quadratic formula is actually kind of a huge topic in math. But this is meant to be a very quick introduction, or maybe even a reminder, because some of you may have seen this before. Um, and the idea here is I just want you to get good at using this formula and plugging the numbers in and being able to get the answers out, okay? So today we're just practicing that. We're just practicing crunching the numbers, getting our answers. When we come back after exams, so when we start second semester, we're going to dive into this formula a little deeper and talk about some of the applications. You know, what does this mean in terms of our graphs and parabolas and all of that stuff, okay? But essentially, this is what a quadratic formula is used for. It's used for solving, and we've done some solving, but it's used for solving when you can't just take a square root. Like when your equations are written in standard form, like this example here, and you've got an x squared and an x separately, you can't solve this the way we normally would. Like you can't add the 4 to the other side and divide by the 2 and all that stuff. It's not going to work because you have an x squared and an x, and you can't combine the two of them. Some of you ran into this problem on those ones where it had like, x minus 4 squared equals, I don't know, 16, let's say. Okay, and you tried to FOIL this. If you FOILed this when you were trying to solve, your equation turned out looking something like this, and then you couldn't go any further. That was why I told you not to not to FOIL before. But now this is the way that we're going to be able to solve things when they're in that standard form. Okay, so I'm just going to make a quick note here. This is how you solve in standard form. And remember, solving means you're finding out what does the x value actually equal. And in order for this to work, you have to have your equation set equal to 0. Okay, so you'll notice this equation I gave you down here is already set equal to 0 for you. You may have to rearrange some equations from time to time, but I think today we're keeping it pretty simple. Okay, and by the way, I should have mentioned this at the beginning. This is going to be short, but you probably will want to write this down. You'll definitely want at least the formula written down. And I would go ahead and write down this one example that we're going to do together too, so that you can then go work on your assignment correctly. Okay, so first thing is we need to identify A, B, and C, and that's just here. A, B, and C. I tried using a different color. This is supposed to be green versus black, and it's not showing up too well, but so now I'm going to plug these things into the formula. So negative b means I want to use negative 7, or I want to do negative 7, so that's going to be positive 7 plus or minus the square root of, and then I'm doing b squared. Very, very, very important that when your b is negative that you put it in parentheses before you square it. Okay, in fact, I would just always put that in parentheses right there. I would just build that right into your formula, that there's supposed to be parentheses there. It's only going to matter when it's negative, but it will make a big difference if you mess it up. 4 times, and then my a value was 2. My c value was negative 4. Okay, all over 2 times my a value, which is 2. So that's just placing all the numbers in the right spots, okay? And then the first step I always take is just the stuff underneath the square root, okay? Now some of you might say, well, can't we just type it in the square root sign? You can, but I know what's coming, okay? When we dive into quadratic formula and we're doing like the harder problems, there's going to be some situations where you're going to want to do this separately from the square root itself. So I would go ahead and just do the numbers without the square root at first. I've got a calculator here. So in my calculator, just so you can see what I'm doing, I'm typing in negative 7 squared. Let's get this up a little bit. Minus 4 times 2 times negative 4, and I get 81. Okay? So now what this is really saying is 7 plus or minus the square root of 81 all over 4. okay, because I did the 2 times 2. So I guess I did that all in one step too. Okay, from here, notice this plus or minus here. That means that I'm going to split into 2 separate calculations, one with a plus, one with a minus. And that should sound pretty familiar to you. Because you're doing a square root, you're going to have a positive and a negative version of that number. So that's where the plus or minus comes from. Okay, so one of my expressions will look like this. 7 plus, and I'm going to go ahead and take that square root of 81. I know that that's a 9. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that into a 9 over 4. And then this one over here will be 7 minus 9 over 4. Okay. Now, this here, I would probably just look at this and say, well, that's 16 over 4, and 16 over 4 is equal to 4. Okay. But if you're going to try to type that into a calculator, just be careful. If you do 7 plus 9 divided by 4, that's not, your calculator's not going to give you the right thing, okay? Because it's just doing 9 divided by 4. So if you do need your calculator for that, make sure you put that in parentheses. Whoops, divided by 4. And there's your 4. Over here, 7 minus 9 is negative 2 over 4. Again, if you really needed your calculator for that. Some of them, the numbers do get a little bit big. So 7 minus 9 divided by 4 is negative 0.5, or negative 1/2. And so then as my final answer, I would say x equals 4 or x equals negative 1/2. Those are my 2 solutions. So just like before when we were just solving by taking square roots, you're typically going to end up with 2 solutions. Now, there are some situations where you'll have no solution. There are some situations where you'll have 1. But for today, they should all come out with 2 solutions just like this. Okay? So the problems that you're being asked to do today in the row game, and we kind of talked about that in class, you should have to do 5 problems unless you're working by yourself. I do expect to see all of your work shown for each one of your problems. Okay? I should see you plugging all of the numbers into the formula. I should see you simplifying that square root piece, and I should see you breaking off into 2 separate expressions and then jumping to your answer. Okay? And so these are the 2 answers. Remember, in that row game, the whole idea is that you're going to do one side and a partner's going to do the other, and then you're going to get together and compare. And the 2 problems that are side by side should have exactly the same answers. So if they don't have the same answers, you can work together to figure out why. It's not just a matter of changing one answer to match the other person's. I'll need you to find in your work where you made your mistake. Okay? But that's really it. That was my crash course on the quadratic formula. Like I said, this is a much bigger topic that we'll address later, but I just want you to get really good at plugging in A, B, and C and crunching those numbers and getting your answers. Okay? If I don't see you, have a great break, and I will see you back here in January.